Picture this. It's the tertiary period and you're an early human who just caught wild game. You all gather around the fire and carve into the beast, but before you take a bite of it, you see somebody who sticks it into the fire. The red meat slowly turns into a brownish color. You're astonished. You're kind of wary, but you try it and you realize that's the most incredible thing you've ever tasted. Maybe even world-changing. Between 1.8 million years ago and 400,000 years ago, cavemen discovered fire and along with it, the ability to cook their food. Humans had long been a vegetarian species that consumed wild plants. However, as they discovered that they can hunt and gather, they became omnivores with a more varied diet. Because the tertiary period was abundant with all sorts of organisms, humans were prone to getting contaminated with viruses when they ate this new raw meat. However, as cooking became more common practice, they soon discovered that less people would get sick if the food was thoroughly cooked through. Because of this discovery, common food viruses like Salmonella and E. coli weren't so widespread anymore, and it wasn't until shortly after that people began to notice that cooked food helped develop your brain further and give you an evolutionary advantage, as it made it easier to digest and process nutrients. We now cook to enhance these added benefits by making dishes that are special to us through culture or family. So what happens when we cook something? Well, first off, all food is composed of a few elements as dissolved salts, like sodium, magnesium, chlorine, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and calcium. There's also elements that are found in smaller amounts like iron, copper, and zinc. These are all considered minerals, but there are also non-mineral elements involved like carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. All these elements combine together to form biochemicals like carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and vitamins. These chemicals are found everywhere in food. For example, carbohydrates are more prominent in starchy foods like beans, lentils, grains, corn, and spuds. They can also be found through glucose like fruits and dairy, or fiber with vegetables and whole grains. Lipids, meanwhile, can be sourced through foods that are more fatty or contain more oils like fish, nuts, avocados, and eggs. But there are also more saturated sources of it like red meat, butter, coconut oil, and pastries. Trans fat is also a type of lipid that is found in margarine or shortening. On the other hand, proteins are found in both animal and plant varieties like meat, poultry, and seafood, or seeds, nuts, and soy products. When these biochemicals react with things like heat, they go through chemical reactions like the Maillard reaction. First reported by Louis-Camille Maillard, a French physician and chemist in the late 1800s, the Maillard reaction is when proteins combine with carbohydrates, typically sugars, to create the browning on the outside of food. This is why when you're grilling a steak, you get that dark brown color around it, or when you fry plantains, they also turn brown. It's all because the glucose molecules in the carbohydrates are reacting with the amino acids found in the proteins. Another chemical reaction that occurs is with foods that have a lot of vitamins. By applying heat, the sugars in the food that have vitamins like broccoli, spinach, and carrots begin to break down because they combine with the water molecules in the food. This is why it's recommended to not fully cook through vegetables because they lose most of their nutritional value, unlike meats which retain most of it. The same thing applies for lipids. When oil is used over and over, it loses its quality and freshness, which in turn makes the food fried in it taste burnt or almost rancid. Biochemical react ultimately though, depending on how the heat is applied. Ever since humans learned the skill to cook, we developed different methods to cook our food, like grilling, boiling, frying, baking, and even sous vide. These methods can change the way food is cooked and even the flavor of it. For example, if someone were to grill a steak, they would have a piece of meat that is smoky and a bit hard because it will lose most of its water content as it's cooking. However, compared to a sous vide steak, it will be more soft and have a more impactful flavor because it's all contained within the plastic bag of the sous vide machine. Although cooking with different tools and methods can alter its process and flavor, it does not change the temperature at which meat is safe to consume. According to the USDA Food and Safety Inspection Service, meats like beef, pork, veal, and lamb should have a minimum temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit and be allowed 3 minutes to rest before consumption. Ground meats, however, should have an internal temperature of 160 Fahrenheit and ground poultry 165 Fahrenheit. Poultry in general, like breasts, thighs, wings, should be at 165 Fahrenheit and seafood should be at 145 Fahrenheit. An interesting thing though about some seafood like shrimp and fish is that when put in an acidic marinade, it cooks on its own. Like the dish ceviche, it consists of a marinade of limes which fish and small shrimp is put in. The citric acid from the lime juice slowly denatures the fish proteins like if it were to be heated. After 15 minutes or so, it leaves the fish with the firm texture like it was cooked. It's said that this dish has been made for thousands of years, originating in Peru. The ingredients and science behind it all comes from the local harvest from the limes to the fish on the coast. Because culture is such a big part of cooking and always has been, it's brought unique flavors and techniques like these into many dishes. Tandoori chicken, for example, is cooked inside of a tandoor oven. A tandoor oven is an urn-shaped oven usually made of clay or concrete and sometimes built into kitchens or outdoor areas, most common in the regions of the Middle East. Its oval-shaped interior allows the open fire at the bottom to reach temperatures as high as 900 degrees Fahrenheit and stay consistent throughout cooking. Due to this, it barely requires refueling. Another example of culture intermixing with the techniques of cooking are tamales. Originating in Mesoamerica around 8000 BCE, the tamal was first said to be made by the Aztecs over open fires. However, when the Spanish came to Latin America around the 1500s, they introduced pots, which then led to the tamales being cooked in them with steam rather than fire. There's plenty of other foods that are cooked this way too, like dumplings, eggs, and rice. As culture mixes with cooking, it creates recipes that are actually beneficial to people depending on where they are and what nutritional value the food contains. Foods like natto, a dish of fermented soybeans from Japan, are actually really high in vitamins like vitamin K and C. It also contains high amounts of minerals like potassium and calcium. This makes it a great dish for digestion, strengthening bones, and improving heart health. Another example of a nutritionally beneficial dish is hummus. Because of its high content of proteins and fiber, it helps manage blood sugar and also heart health. Many other cultural and regional dishes tend to have these sorts of benefits, which allow people to be more exposed to outside foods. In recent years, there's been a rise of molecular gastronomy, otherwise known as culinary alchemy, in many restaurants and kitchens around the world. The concept of molecular gastronomy is fairly new and dates back to the 60s when Nicholas Curti, a British-Hungarian physicist, coined the term. However, culinary alchemy goes as far as the 18th century when Marie-Antoine Carême had studied and wrote detailed essays regarding the intricate connections between our food and science. Because of her writings of useful techniques and fusion of ingredients, chefs and food scientists have been able to grow a new field of research regarding the integration of science into food. With this, they've been able to solve problems about culinary practices surrounding nutrition, food science, and even the art of cooking. Some of the many things that were discovered through molecular gastronomy that are now used today are flash freezing, meat glue, and spherification. Flash freezing is when liquid nitrogen is poured over food to freeze the exterior of it almost instantly. This is used for packaged foods that might travel long distances or for storage purposes. Meat glue is a transglutaminase, which is a class of enzymes that is typically used to bind together proteins and meats. It is also used in many other food products like cheese and baked goods. And spherification is when liquid product is combined with a sodium alginate, then dripped onto a calcium chloride to create orbs of the liquid product. A common example of this is popping boba or vegan caviar. Now, methods like these are used in experimental restaurants in places like Las Vegas and London. Ever since the pandemic happened and food prices rose, people have become more aware of what they're cooking and how they're doing it. Whether it be if there's chemicals in their food or if it's not nutritionally great, people have always been concerned about what's inside their food. Carbs and GMOs have long been the enemy of people in the past, but with new studies coming out, in reality, they're nothing what a mom says on Facebook they are. Without GMOs, you wouldn't even have a yummy banana, just a cylinder with too many seeds, which is why it's been genetically modified over time through breeding to give it more fruit than seed. Our modern banana wouldn't even exist without GMOs because it would be extinct due to the running Panama disease. With more people being concerned about what's inside their food and the rising prices of groceries, sharing recipes online and cooking at home has become more of a daily activity. Because of this, many people experience what is called the PERMA effect. The PERMA effect consists of positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement, which is all present when cooking with family. Positive emotions are triggered when being around people you care about and like, which is often the case when cooking at events. Engagement and relationships are tied together when you cook with people you know and have a meaning to cook with them. And achievement is the product of the meal you and your partner cook together. Today, cooking is more than just a survival tactic. It is chemistry and a skill that almost everyone in the world uses. It is an art, it is a career, and it is activity that families and friends come together to do. It is a way to share cultures and connect all around the world. It's like that one saying, the best way to someone's heart is through their stomach.